Hey guys, this is Nate and this is the Nader Tater channel. Today we're going to talk about fixed wireless home internet. I have 3 different gateways here from 3 different services from 2 different providers. So T-Mobile and Verizon. And this covers 4G LTE service as well as 5G, both 5G kind of nationwide mid-band stuff as well as 5G ultra wideband, which is the fastest out there. So I'm going to talk about a ton of topics here. I'll list them off here, talk about the price of them, contract and any kind of fees that go along with it, their data, how hard it is to set them up, if they're geo-locked, can you move them around, can you travel, go camping with them, that kind of stuff, what their service coverage is like, Wi-Fi coverage of each of these gateways, what kind of settings or router capability is built in here, what type of speeds you can expect based off different conditions, and I'll talk about that. And then things like ping or latency and how they differ between these different ones here. And then we'll talk about VPN, voice over IP, gaming, streaming, external antenna, and other topics here. So I will compare all these. It'll be an in-depth video. I will do a quick shout out to my channel, Nader Tater. Feel free to subscribe, like this video, and see my other ones. I have lots of content about fixed wireless home internet, so you can see my other videos out there as well as other content that I have, so feel free to join there. So let's start with the monthly price. All these are fairly similar. The cheapest is about $40 a month, I think, for this one if you have Verizon cell phone plan already and you do auto pay and some other stuff. And then next up is the T-Mobile. It's typically about $50 a month with auto pay. There are a couple discounts. You can get it down to $40 if you're a senior, and sometimes they bump the price up to $60 a month. So that's there. And then this one is the most expensive, but still pretty affordable, I would say. I think it's $50 a month if you have Verizon plan, or $70 if you don't with auto pay. So still very reasonable. The one thing that I will say, those are no contracts, so that is per month. And T-Mobile kind of guarantees that your price won't change. I think with Verizon that is not true, so that price might change at some point in the future. And the other thing on the price is equipment fees. Both T-Mobile and Verizon 5G, they do not charge a fee. You're basically borrowing the unit from them. You have to send it back to them when you're done. With Verizon's 4G box here, the small one, they actually make you buy it, and it's $240 right now. Since I just signed up for it, I don't know how long they've been doing this, but they actually give you a $10 per month credit on your bill, so you end up paying nothing if you keep it for 2 years. But if you cancel the service before 2 years, you're stuck with the remainder of that price. So that's the one downside to that plan there. And then as far as data goes, all of them offer unlimited data now. In the past, sometimes they limited it, but they're all unlimited data, and there's no speed threshold once you reach a certain amount of data that you'll see often on hotspots or cell phones. These are all the same speed, no matter how much data you use. Now, as far as ease of setup, the easiest one by far is this Verizon 4G one. You literally take it out of the box, you plug in the AC cord to the wall, and you wait about 2 minutes for it to boot up, and you're good to go. You connect to the Wi-Fi and you're off on the internet. That's by far the easiest. The T-Mobile one was almost as easy for me, since I got this like a year ago. When I plugged it in, I had to do a firmware update, and they do have a T-Mobile home internet app that tries to help you go through the setup, and it's more picky about the orientation. This one wasn't, but this one you want to really place it. I'll talk about that more in a bit, but otherwise it's kind of a plug and play. This Verizon 5G ultra wideband one was the biggest pain to set up, and both on the software side as well as the fact that they have it set up where they want you to mount it onto a window. So they give you this, they call it frog tape, I think, or gecko tape, something like that. But you stick that to the window, and then you mount this device on there. So you have to have this big thing sticking up on one of your windows, or you can put it on your wall. But I don't understand why they did that. I think just as reasonable would be to put it on a desk or a table. I personally would rather have a table or a bookshelf or something by a window and just have it sitting on there. That one is the worst for physically setting up, and then it's very sensitive with positioning. And so to try to solve that, they give an app that you go through. It's really quite cumbersome. I didn't like it. I know they're trying to help, but really just created more problems. And I'll get into a little bit why I had some other problems about activating it as well. So that is for setup. And then as far as after you set it up, you can move all of these around and they will continue to get service wherever they have that provider. However, that is against the terms of service. So all of these have a clause that says you cannot change the service address without contacting them first and letting them know. So they're not supposed to be moved, but they do work. So as far as that service coverage area goes, T-Mobile by far is the leader here. They have the best coverage for this specific T-Mobile home internet device around the US over these other ones. Verizon's 4G one is the next most available. You know, all these, you type in your address online and they'll tell you if you have something available or not. More people will be able to get this T-Mobile than these other ones. And you know, for me, this one's the only one available at my house. These other two I had to give, we had to sign them up under different addresses so I could qualify to get them, so I could test them. So this 5G ultra wideband is super rare. Like, it's hard to explain to you how rare it is to get Verizon's 5G ultra wideband. It's literally in very select parts of major cities and specifically on specific roads and outside. If you're inside, you may or may not get it. That's why they have it designed to go up against a window to point outside, and you have to point it at the little micro tower that's out there. So very finicky, but I'll go into a little more detail. There's a trick here that this will work if you don't have 5G ultra wideband. I mean, basically it's after you activate it. You have to activate it where the service address is and where the 5G ultra wideband service is. But once you activate it, if you were to lose that 5G ultra wideband because you moved it or whatnot, it will continue working on 4G speeds. And I'll compare that speed of this guy versus this guy in the same location on 4G. So now we'll talk about Wi-Fi coverage. Wi-Fi coverage for all of these guys is actually surprisingly good. And I'll say I was really impressed with the T-Mobile one from the get-go when I got it over a year ago, with just how far it covers. They are all Wi-Fi 6, which means they have both the 2.4 gigahertz channels and the 5 gigahertz channels. So by default, they automatically do the band steering where there's only one Wi-Fi name or SSID that you see, but it's actually lots of different channels on two different frequency spectrums in there. And the T-Mobile one is impressively long range. The next best one is actually this one, the Verizon 4G one. And then last place is this 5G unit here. And I didn't do a lot of crazy testing. I was really just looking at the signal quality that I could get when I went throughout my house. What I'll say is the footprint of my house is 2,500 square feet, and all of these were able to, I'm actually in the far corner right here of the house. I went to the other far corner of the 2,500 square feet, and all of them had good coverage to there. Well, I wouldn't say good, they had acceptable. Once you're on the far side, you would probably start to see some slowdowns on your faster connections, but still good enough for most people. So now let's move over and talk about the settings and router capabilities that each of these have. And I'll start with this Verizon 4G one. It honestly has the best as far as settings and configurabilities when you log into it, and you can change the most settings in there. You still don't get a full-on bridge mode with any of these devices, but this one gives you the most options for changing, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as far as how that makes it more compatible for voice over IP, gaming, streaming, and stuff like that. All right, and then the next best one, which is really so close to this one, this one that makes it stand apart is it has application layer gateway settings, ALG settings, which is really kind of a commercial router setting option that most home ones don't have. So this 4G one has it, the 5G one does not have it. Yeah, but otherwise it has all the same UPnP, it has, you know, DHCP, you can change all that. You can change firewall settings, you can change parental controls, and some other things in there. I have detailed videos of each of these you can go and look into and actually go through the web interface, so I won't cover that too much detail here. But then the worst one is this 5G T-Mobile, and it has essentially no settings in there. So you are locked in to what they have. No port forwarding, both of these have port forwarding, no firewall on off, no bridge mode, no DMZ mode, no pass-through, nothing like that on this T-Mobile one. So that's probably the most disappointing thing with this one. So what kind of speeds do you think you can get out of these devices? Well, the slowest, not surprisingly, is a 4G only service. Not just because it's only 4G, but because it is capped. So this is the only one that is capped of these guys, are throttled. And that throttling is at 50 megabits per second down and 6 megabits per second up. And so even if you're in a place where you get better service than that, that's what this guy stuck to. That's what they've decided to do. I'm not sure why, but they did. The next fastest is going to be this T-Mobile one. And the real thing here is there's a lot of variation. So I would say in most places on this Verizon one, you're gonna get that 50/6. Some places you won't, but they're being more restricted where they offer it. T-Mobile is being a little more open, and they're saying if you have service and we have capability on our towers, they're sending this out there, but then it's going to vary a lot based off not only if you get 4G or 5G, but what type. So what bands you get. They have some bands that are better than others, and I have more videos in detail about that, so I won't cover it too much. But what I'll say is down here in the office, I typically have it up there on top of my printer. You can probably see a cable. I get about 75 megabits per second down, and I get about 30 megabits per second upload. And that is on a B66 band for my primary, which is 4G, and then an N71 band for my secondary, which is the 5G non-standalone. And so with that, I get decent speeds down here. If I move it up to a third floor loft, then I get much better speeds because I switch over to a N41, which is a 5G ultra capacity band, and I bump up to about 250 megabits per second for download and about 20 megabits per second upload. So my upload actually gets a little worse. My 4G base switches to a B2 band, and I'm about a mile away from the tower. But there's people that report speeds in excess of 600 megabits per second download and like a couple hundred megabits per second upload. So those guys are closer to the towers or have really updated towers. So you can get impressive speeds on this one, but I would say for the most part, expectations would be maybe around 100 megabits per second download and 20 or 30 upload. That's an average. Again, it's going to vary a lot based off your own situation. All right, and so one other thing to note about it is that it is deprioritized data, especially on the T-Mobile one, and a lot of people do notice that if they're in a congested area. So what that means is your speed is not throttled like it is on the 5G unit, and it is not limited based off how much data you use, but all the time you're kind of on the back of the line for the network traffic, which means if there's congestion, lots of users, it's a peak time like evening time, then you might notice a slowdown, namely in your download speeds. But for some areas that can cripple this guy. So some people report, you know, it's almost unusable. For me, I don't really see that. I see a little bit of reduction in speed, but it is not bad for me at all. So that's another thing to keep note of on the T-Mobile one. For the Verizon one, this, when I tested it in the ultra wideband area down in Ann Arbor, I was getting close to 1 gigabit per second download and a couple hundred megabits per second upload. So really impressive speeds, and that is fairly common, I guess I would say, for the ultra wideband. So the areas that you do get it, people report a gig, even sometimes 2 or 3 gigs per second of download capability. So really impressive speeds there. And then outside of that, you know, I've been testing it with the LTE service. So down here, I had in one of my previous videos when I was talking about the review of this guy originally, and I was only getting like 40 megabits per second download, and I forget what it was. It was 12 or 15 megabits per second upload down here. But since then, I went up to my 3rd floor loft to compare what I would get where I know I get better cell service, and this one was getting about 150 megabits per second down on 4G, and then it was about 26 megabits per second upload. So it wasn't that far off the T-Mobile. Remember, the T-Mobile was about 250. So I mean, it was 100 megabits per second slower on download, but overall this one can actually get some decent speeds. And the beauty of this is, if you compare, you got to pay $10 a month more for this guy, but you don't have to buy it. They'll give this gateway to you. It doesn't have the cap that this one does. So I don't know why they're doing this, or if they're planning to change it, but if you want Verizon 4G service, I wouldn't buy this one. I would get this one. And the only trick there is you got to figure out how to get this gateway by being in a 5G ultra wideband area when you sign up. But once you take it and put it in the LTE space, you don't have the cap that this one does at 50 megabits per second. And this one also throttles Netflix. I'll talk about that in a second. So that is the beauty of this guy. And so if I had ultra wideband, this is the fastest, bar none. You can't touch it. But then otherwise, it's kind of a crapshoot as far as this one or that one, depending on your specific area and what your towers and bands available to you are, as well as congestion. Okay, so the next really important thing about your service is ping, or your latency or lag. And this is how long it takes for your signal to get from you all the way to where it's going. And there's a lag in that, and typically you want it to be, say, less than 50 milliseconds or something like that, for you to not really notice. Above that, you're going to start to notice that things are slower, things like clicking a website to load, or if you're doing two-way video conferencing, or if you're doing gaming, that kind of stuff, you're going to notice ping or latency. The best one that I saw, I guess I'll talk about two things. One is unloaded ping, and the other one is loaded ping. If you're using speedtest.net, that is an unloaded ping number. So that means they're just checking without trying to send a lot of data, just a small amount of data of how quickly can it respond. And that one really doesn't mean a whole lot to me. I care more about the loaded ping. So when I'm moving lots of data, or I'm doing multiple things at once, let's say I'm someone streaming 4K video, and then I want to do a web browser, I want to send a request out for a website, that's what I care about. And this one actually gives one of the best loaded pings out there, and it could be because it's throttled, so that gives extra bandwidth over and above. But this one's about 50 milliseconds of loaded ping, which is very different than unloaded ping. So, and typically loaded ping is much higher, or somewhat higher. So then if we talk about this T-Mobile one, when I'm down here and I'm on this N71 band, I get really bad ping. I would say it is about 40 milliseconds for unloaded, but around 1,000 milliseconds, or 1 second for loaded ping at times. Sometimes it might be 500 milliseconds. I've gotten as bad as 2.5 seconds of loaded ping reported from fast.com on this guy. So that's almost comically slow. But the beauty of it is if I go upstairs to the 3rd floor and I hop on their N41 band, which is newer, better, more capable, then my ping greatly drops, and it's about 35 milliseconds of unloaded ping, and I was getting like 98 milliseconds of loaded ping. So much improved, and probably good enough that I won't complain about it at all at that level. And that's another thing that's going to change for you based off your exact situation. I can't tell you what yours will be because it's going to depend on your towers, your signal quality, where you place this thing, all that kind of stuff. On this Verizon 5G, when I was on ultra wideband, the loaded ping and unloaded ping is super impressive, super low. I think the unloaded ping was like single digits, like 7 milliseconds or something, and loaded ping was a couple dozen milliseconds. Very slow, or sorry, very quick response there. On LTE though, up here on the 3rd floor, it actually had poor performance as well. So this one was getting me like 400 to 500 milliseconds of loaded ping when I was on just the LTE service. So this one has some of the same problems that I'm seeing on T-Mobile for loaded ping that this 4G all-in-one does not see. All right, so let's talk about VPN and voice over IP. None of these have a working telephone jack. The T-Mobile does actually have a telephone jack back here, but it's inactive, it doesn't work. So none of these you can plug a landline phone in and get, you know, access to the dial tone or whatnot. So the voice over IP that they support would be some kind of phone that is Ethernet based, or something that's hooked up through your computer to get the connection to the internet. But otherwise, these do support voice over IP. There are some hiccups that some of them could have, and that's where the 4G LTE one is the only box I was talking about earlier that has something called the SIP ALG, which is this application layer gateway setting, and you want to disable SIP, which is just a specific part of the firewall. You leave all the rest of the firewall in place, but that ALG can sometimes go in, and when it's inspecting the packets of voice over IP, it can manipulate them and either cause problems or cause it to completely not work to start with. So this is the only one that offers that ability. These other ones don't. This one you can turn off or modify the firewall overall. You can make it from like medium to high, but I don't think you can specifically target that voice over IP kind of specific issue. This one you can't target it at all, but people post success. In fact, they even have a promotion or something with Omaphone where you get a discount. So it does work. And for VPN, kind of similar story. These two boxes have a few more settings that let you mess with for firewall and port forwarding and that kind of stuff if you need it. This one does not, but they all in theory kind of support VPN. And the most common thing that people see they have a problem with is sometimes the MTU packet size. And that's with cellular. When it sends data, it sends it in specific packets. So think of it as like a box. The box is only so big that it sends from here to the tower. And a VPN puts overhead. So you have to put an extra, think of it like a binder. You have a stack of paper. Well, VPN, now they have to go inside of a binder, so now they take up more space. So you need to have that. And on cellular, you don't always have that overhead, so then they fragment the packets, and when you fragment it in VPN, it doesn't work. So you can adjust your MTU packet size on your VPN settings, or if you have your own router plugged in through here, you can apply that MTU to every traffic that goes to them, and that can fix some of your VPN issues. I won't go in any more detail than that. I have other videos out there talking about some of that stuff. Okay. So the next thing is gaming and streaming. So gaming, I'm not a gamer. All these do work with gaming, and the biggest problem you'll probably notice is the lag. These, other than the ultra wideband service, are all going to have not the best lag. Sometimes you might get reasonable lag, sometimes you might get terrible lag. That's going to kind of depend. But also all of them have, since they're cellular, they have CG NAT, which is kind of like a double NAT issue. So it's harder for you to get some of the open NAT types that you want, and there aren't a lot of options to fix that. So it's kind of a little bit of a roll of dice depending on what type of gaming and what type of connection you have. So for streaming, this one, as I mentioned before, throttles it. It's about 8 megabits per second download on Netflix, and that's tested by going to fast.com, which uses Netflix servers. And that means that you might have trouble streaming 4K. You either might get some buffering, or I might not want to do, you might have to do 1080p for sure will work, and maybe 2K could work okay. These other ones I had not seen a limitation. And just sorry, coming back on this one, is that's Netflix specific, and they probably pick out a couple other popular streaming services like maybe like Hulu or something. But when I did YouTube and when I went onto my Roku TV and opened up some of the various channel apps, I was able to do 4K without a problem. So it's not stopping all of your streaming from being 4K, but there's a chance that it might get degraded on this one. These other two, that's not the case. I didn't see any kind of throttling based off streaming specifically. And the real issue with the streaming stuff is if you're using any service that gives you local channels, something like Hulu Live does, it wants to verify your location. And with these, your location is not necessarily, or pretty much, it's almost always not, should I say, where you're physically located. So it might show up, if I'm on these, it might show up that I'm in Detroit, or it might show up I'm in Lansing, Michigan, or it might show up I'm in Flint, but it pretty much never shows up in my actual city that I'm at. And that's because the way the cell networks work, you connect to them and then you go within their cell network, and then you pop out of their network to the internet, and wherever you pop out of their network is where you appear to be located, but it's not actually where you are located. So that will mess up authentication on a lot of these services that say, hey, here's your local channels. I've had it even as far out as like being in Denver, Colorado. So if I had a service that was using my IP address for my location, it would give me Denver, Colorado local channels. So obviously that doesn't work too well. So that can be a problem with streaming stuff. And then last, external antennas. So if you really want to improve the signal on these, people have done mods to the T-Mobile one, and I've taken this apart. I've done videos of how to install them. So you can put an external antenna or two of them on this gateway and they can work. It does take some disassembly. It is reversible. This unit has been taken apart and put back together and you cannot tell, but it's not plug and play. It's not easy. On the 4G Verizon, there's not an easy way to add an external antenna. I've taken it apart and there are not easy connections to use, even if you wanted to modify it like this T-Mobile one. On the 5G unit, I have not taken it apart, and there's a reason for that. Verizon actually offers professional installation of an exterior mounted antenna with a cable inside to a different gateway if you don't get signal. So if you put this guy up on the window and you test it all out all different ways, and you follow all their guidance, and you're in their service area and don't get the signal, then like I said, they will come out and do a professional install and get you that that service. So obviously do that over trying to do a DIY setup. I'm not sure if they charge for that. I kind of assume they do, but I'm not positive there. What this kind of tells you is the only one you can really put your own external antenna is a T-Mobile one, at least right now with the options they have out here. So that's something to consider. Obviously, we would really like them to give us ports so you can not have to modify stuff. You just get a port on the back of these to install antennas, but they don't do that. Alright, so between these two guys, it's kind of a toss-up. You know, this one might be faster speed if you get the 5G service from T-Mobile. If you don't, and you're only on 4G for both of them, this one might be faster. This one has port forwarding and UPnP and DMZ mode. settings in there, so it's a little bit more configurable there, whereas the T-Mobile is not. T-Mobile has guaranteed cost that's going to stay with you with no contract. This one is not guaranteed. So it's kind of a toss-up. For me personally, I'm actually keeping the T-Mobile one. I've thought about switching actually to this guy, but for right now I'm actually staying with T-Mobile, but I could see a person going with either one. The other big challenge here is for me to use this one here at my house long term. I would be really breaching the contract of terms of service, as far as this house is not in a service address that is available for this gateway, because I don't have 5G ultra wideband around here, and right now they're really restricting to that. So that's the only holdup. The other thing about T-Mobile is the gateway is known to have some problems. Right here is a fan that I have. You know, this is a guy on Etsy that makes these, and these plugs in and helps cool it down, because people have noticed problems with them, overheating, or our gateways crapping out. I don't have a lot of details to tell you about these, other than this one has a fan built in. I have not checked or confirmed with this one if it does have a fan or not, but at first glance, you know, this one appears to actually be a little bit more robust, and this one appears to be a little bit more challenged, both on the firmware side and the hardware built into this gateway itself. So I might play with this some more before I cancel the service or return it, but you know, for sure these two are some really good competition for other options that you might have in your area. Okay, and last statement here is, no matter which one of these you get, other than being in an ultra wideband area for 5G, I would say it's very hard to beat a good hardline ISP connection. If you have fast cable or fiber especially, I would pick that over these. I don't have that option in my house, and so without that, these things are a godsend, because they give me speeds I can never get any other way, and it's unlimited data and whatnot. So but they have their limitations I talked about, between CG-NAT and not having bridge modes, so they do have limitations out there. The streaming live stuff, so all those things matter, and it really depends on if those are deal breakers for you. If they are, avoid these. If they are not, this might be the cheapest, fastest internet you can get. So thanks for watching the video. I hope if you have any comments or questions, you will put them down below in the comment section. Like the video obviously, and think about joining my channel to tag along.